Welcome to the Chai Center. Glad to have you back, and hope you're enjoying this latest course of fascinating Jewish personalities. And yesterday we the yesterday's course was on Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, and you can find this and yesterday's and last year's and all the courses in between and classes in between. You can find them on thechaicenter.com/academy. You also may find them in YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and go to Chai Academy, you'll see a list, a plethora of classes, if you will, and each class is self-contained, so you can watch a class and pick and choose, etc. Today's class, we're going to focus on a Jew, by the name of Leon Lev Trotsky. He was born in 1880 and he died in 1940. His name, hey Susan, hello. His name was obviously Leon Trotsky doesn't sound very Jewish, but he was born Lev Davidovich Bronstein, and he was born to a wealthy Jewish family, which is today somewhere in Ukraine. And but the truth be told, he's a Jew by birth only. Now, I use the term only. I would never use that term, Jew by birth only to a select few people who, because I believe everybody's redeemable and everybody has their own level of observance and where they are in the totem pole of Jewish life. Everybody has their own level of hypocrisy. Nobody's perfect. We're all human. And therefore, because a person commits an infraction against God's will or whatever, they're still Jewish. However, Trotsky leaves an indelible mark of what he did, what he sought to do, what he accomplished. Trotsky, I stand by what I said. He's a Jew by birth only. And isn't it funny, by the way, how a lot of these communists, the founders of communism, were all wealthy. Not much to lose. But anyway, he was born into a wealthy family, and at the age of 18 and 19, he embraced Marxism. He got very involved in Marxism, and he was even younger, actually. He was like 18. He was born in 1880, say I think like 1896, 1897 is where he started to really get into the throw of communism, Marxism, etc. Interesting to note, by the way, that he lived for a long time in Nikolaev, in Russia, or Ukraine. I think, Ukraine. And I may have my countries mixed up. And that's where the Lubavitcher Rebbe was born. So, two greats came, one, diabolical and one awesome. Both had their upbringing in Nikolaev. In 1898, as I said, he was involved in communism and Marxism, which was diametrically opposed to the Tsar. The Tsar was not a communist. The Tsar wasn't a great person, and the Tsar's government had they too sent people to Siberia, and one of the people they arrested and sent to Siberia, not once but twice, was Trotsky, and he was sent to prison in Siberia, which he, by the way, he escaped from. Escaped. How many people can say they escaped from Siberia? He escaped twice. And his name, how did he get the name Trotsky, by the way, when his name is Davidovich Bronstein, is because one of his jailers was Trotsky. And he took his jailer's name. So he became Trotsky. And he moved to London in 1902 And in London is where he met Lenin. Of course, Lenin was the first person to take over. After the fall of Tsarist Russia and the Bolsheviks and the communists, and they're called by different names because there were different factions. And Lenin and Bronstein and Trotsky spoke the same language. At a later time, they had different opinions, and Trotsky sided with a different branch, with the real Bolsheviks, which was opposed to or had a different philosophy, ideology than Lenin. But anyway, he came back in 1905. He came back and he was arrested again and sent to Siberia by the Tsar. And he escaped and then went to live in Central Europe, Western Europe, really, Hungary and Germany, etc., etc. In 1917, and that's where he preached and he taught, and he lived in New York City for a while. He lived in London for a while, and by the way, he was arrested by the Brits in Canada. He was put in prison in Canada, and he used to preach to the point he was such an influential speaker. Is that the government, the army, the military, didn't allow him. The general didn't allow him to speak, and he didn't allow him to speak to fellow prisoners. Didn't allow him to speak and to preach his communism diatribe, and his manifesto. And the military, the soldiers as well as the prisoners, actually wrote a letter of protest that they want him to speak. Something happened in 1917. Now, between 1902 to 1917, there was a lot of protests, etc., and that's why he was expelled, by the way. But in 1917, in February, there was this February Revolution. So it wasn't just protests and strikes and upheavals, etc. There was actually an attempted coup, a revolution. And it happened in February. And it's called, you may be familiar with the term bourgeois. And it was after is in March of 1917, Trotsky came back. Because he foresaw that this revolution is going to run a course. And he wanted to be there. On his way, he was arrested, etc., and ended up in Canada. But he made it. He came back, and he made it. And he was very instrumental in the October 1917 revolution, which ended up with the 5 family members of the Tsar. Anastasia was that famous story, and the Tsarist government was sent in exile and eventually killed because they were nervous that if the anti-communists beat back the communists / the Bolsheviks, then the Tsar, nothing has changed, and the Tsarists are going to be in control again. So they killed them. And this is how Anastasia came about, is they killed them. They were locked up in some palace or something, and they killed them. And eventually, when they dug up the bodies, they only found 3 of the 5 bodies initially, and that's where they said, okay, they had escaped, etc. Now, from March of 1918 until January 1925, Trotsky was the head of the Red Army, the Communist Army. During these years, and especially during the first 2 years, you figure from 1917 to 1919, 50,000 Jews were killed by the anti-communist army. And the reason why they killed 50,000 Jews is because the generals of the anti-communist army said, look what the Jews are doing to us. Look what this Trotsky, the traitor, the treasonous Jew, killed our Tsar, trying to instill terrible change in communism into our country, and they took revenge, and they killed 50,000 Jews within a couple of years. And they blame the Jews. They blame the Jews for coming. What, you know when they say they always blame the Jew? This is exactly the case they're talking about. They blame the Jew for communism because, first of all, Marx was a communist, of course, and Trotsky is a communist, etc. Here's the interesting thing, though, is that first of all, Marx, at the age of 6, converted to Christianity by his parents. But there's a very famous story with the chief rabbi of Moscow, Rabbi Mazer, which Mazer sounds like Mesa, by the way, and I wonder if the Jackie Mason and that family are related because their name is Mesa. So Rabbi Mazer, the chief rabbi of Moscow, met with Trotsky and begged him and said, Leon, right, you're a Jew, and I'm begging you, you can help out. You have at your disposal the Red Army. Please, I'm begging you. Jews are being killed en masse. I'm begging you. To which Trotsky answered, and as he always did whenever his Jewishness was brought up, and he goes, me? A Jew? You must have me mistaken. Right? I am, and listen to these words that he said, I am not a Jew. I'm a social democrat. Those were his words. Now, we've heard social democrat before, right? Basically, Trotsky denounced his Judaism. I opine that Bernie Sanders has done exactly the same thing. Bernie Sanders calls himself a social democrat. He can turn his back on Israel, can turn his back on everything. He's a social democrat, a Jew by birth only. Once again, I only say this by very few, but someone like that is someone like that. Rabbi Mazer responded, and I don't think he responded to Trotsky, but he responded, and it was a famous response. He goes, the Trotskys cause all the trouble, and it's the Brunsteins who pay for it. So now, and by the way, because of Trotsky, specifically because of him, historians have written about this. There's a historian, Rothman, who wrote that because of Trotsky, Jews have always been associated with communism, even though a Jew like me rejects communism. I'm a believer in capitalism, as I'm sure most of my audience. But because of the founders of communism, Jews have always been associated with communism, and Jews have paid a heavy price, by the way. Jews have basically they've suffered at greatly because of this, and it's ironic, by the way, because Jewish communists are, and there's a lot of irony here. We'll talk about some further irony. Jewish communists are generally very hostile to fellow Jews who are not communists. Bernie, right? Karl Marx in 1818, right? He was born in 1818. He was converted at the age of 6, right? His first essay that he ever wrote was called The Jewish Question. And by the way, his first essay is something that Hitler took to heart. And his first essay was very Nazi-like. If you look at his essay, you would say Hitler wrote this. But it wasn't. It was a Jew by birth that wrote this, Karl Marx. He says the secular cult is haggling. The secular god was money. We need emancipation. Emancipation, he says, is to be free from the Jew, free from the haggling, free from the money. He says money is the jealous god of Israel. Hitler said all these things. It's exactly what Hitler said, right? And so while Trotsky, by the way, um, um, while Trotsky wasn't such a rabid self-hater as Marx was, but under his rule, and he didn't rule for long, as the foreign secretary, as the head of the Red Army, under his rule, what happened was 99% of synagogues and Jewish establishments were shut down in communist Russia, and wherever their tentacles, reached, he banned Hebrew. Right? The Russian Orthodox religion was shut down. Right? He banned Russian Zionist organization, which at its peak at 300,000. And it was 300,000 strong, and it was abolished. Hebrew was abolished, right? Hebrew schools were abolished. Everything was abolished. Jewish schools were abolished, and there was he right brought in to Russia for basically for 70 years. He brought in this secularism where you're not Jews were not part and parcel of the fabric. You had nothing. If you wanted to study, you had to do it. You had to do it as in communist Russia. You had to do it, underground, under the table. Matzah bakeries were the it was illegal. Circumcisions, brisson were illegal. Everything was done clandestinely with fear of death or being sent to Siberia. I can't tell you how many Chabad Jews were sent to Siberia or promptly executed. Schneerson was considered an enemy of the state, treason, because they kept the Judaism alive. So he was responsible for the tearing down of Jewish establishments. If you were a Russian Zionist Jew, you were in fear for your life. Trotsky. Here's an irony that is too huge to ignore. When Lenin died, Stalin got together 3 or 4 important people. Now, Trotsky was supposed to take over when Lenin died. Lenin had a series of strokes, and his health was in decline, and Stalin got together 3 other leaders, and they made a pact together that Trotsky will not be the leader when Lenin dies. And there's a letter that was written by Trotsky's brother-in-law, who was also a member of the Politburo, and a high-ranking member of the Communist, or sent a letter to Lenin saying that you're throwing out a genius like Trotsky, and Lenin says it's ridiculous. Whoever heard of such a thing? But it happened. It happened. When Lenin died, Stalin took over. And Winston Churchill, and I printed it out. Winston Churchill, when Stalin took over, which was a shock because they thought Trotsky was, Winston Churchill wrote the following. It is wild. And Churchill, he wasn't a Jew, but he accurately depicted the frustration that must have been provoked in Trotsky, and basically it must have been so gallingly appalling to Trotsky that because of his own Jewish origin, it was perhaps the major reason why he wasn't chosen. This is what Churchill wrote about Trotsky. He was still a Jew. Nothing could get over that. Hard fortune when you have deserted your family, repudiated your race, spat upon your religion of your father, to be balked of so great a prize for so narrow-minded a reason. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. The man who turned against his own people was not chosen to be the leader of communism because he was a Jew. Right? um, and it was and it was there's further irony to this, by the way, is that Stalin kicked him out, expelled him. He went to Turkey, and after Turkey, he went to when he exiled, he eventually ended up in Mexico, but he denounced Stalin as an anti-Semite. Trotsky, the self-hating, despicable Jew, denounced Stalin. The irony gets worse and worse, right? And it gets more ironic, is the American Jewish communist community, when he was announcing, when Trotsky was announcing Stalin as a Jew hater, they said, not true. Communism doesn't hate Jews. So this vicious cycle of karma is so ironic. He was a Jew hater, self-hating Jew. He was kicked out because he was a Jew. He denounced Stalin as being an anti-Semite. The American Jewish communists said, no, communism don't hate Jews. And he wrote, by the way, in 1940, right? He was such a, even though he was kicked out and had these disappointments. And by the way, his kids, he had 3 kids from 2 wives. 2 of his kids were killed because of his last name. He tried to change their last name to something else, but they were killed. One of his kids committed suicide, but the other 2 were killed in the purge, in the Stalin purge. They took his wife's name, right? But he said, no, don't call them Trotsky, call them whatever the name was, Sedenfil or something, Sedenov, something like that. I don't remember. But they were killed by the Stalin purge. His wife was killed by the Stalin purge, right? They wanted to make sure that no Trotsky would grow up and take revenge. His daughter was killed herself, but not before that her the rest of her family were killed by the purge. And he wrote in 1940, after all his disappointments, he wrote many things, but one of them he wrote that Zionism cannot save the Jews. He says the only thing that can overthrow Jew hatred and save the Jew, and the only thing that can overthrow and help the Jew is the overthrowing of capitalism into communism. It's crazy man's talk. He obviously was, in addition to everything, he was insane. Because the truth is, and this is and if there's any communist Jew listening to this, you probably should end the video now. The truth is, communism has never, ever been good for the Jew. You can call it by any name you want. You can call it socialist, Democrat. It hasn't been good for the Jew. It hasn't been good for the Jew in its origin of birth in Russia. It hasn't been good for the Jew in any other state that Russia took over, the Soviet Union took over. It's not good in Venezuela. It's not good in Cuba. It's not good anywhere. Where has it been good? Right? His life came to an end in 1940 in Mexico, where Stalin sent an assassinator by the name of Mikhailo, who I think that was his name. This is all from memory, where he was in his study, and Stalin, this assassinator came in, and he had an ice pick, which was flat on one side, pointed the other. So the pointy side, he hit Trotsky. Trotsky fought with him. Trotsky actually broke the hand of the assassin while having this ice pick, and he shouted, and Trotsky's bodyguards came in, and they fought this assassin, and they were going to kill him. And Trotsky says, no, we have to interrogate him. Trotsky was taken to hospital, where he died. And now what's interesting, by the way, I missed something about the children, is that one child was executed. The other child got an infection. He had a kidney stone, a gallstone or something, and he was taken to hospital. But a friend of his, who was also who was a communist, told the White Army that Trotsky's son is in hospital and he got an infection and they didn't give him help, and that's how he died. So they didn't actually, it wasn't an overt kill, it was a covert kill. But anyway, so he was killed, died in Mexico, and he was buried in Mexico, and there's a museum now, and it's called the Friends of Trotsky. They upkeep the museum, and you can make donations if you wish. I wish I knew how to hack into that donation registry and basically take the money away. But here's the interesting thing. Trotsky, because of his anti-Stalin stand, he was written out of the books. In communist Russia, they never learned about him. Right? So not only was he shunned while he was alive, he was shunned posthumously by communism. And Khrushchev, when he came to power, so they had such a thing called rehabilitation, where he realized that Stalin was a maniac, and Stalin was mentally sick, and Stalin, took many people out of the books. So Khrushchev started to rehabilitate and bring people in who were killed, and he pardoned people who Stalin said were treasonous. You know, Khrushchev did not rehabilitate Trotsky. He wasn't rehabilitated and brought back in until 2000 or something. Way late in the game. But Khrushchev in 1951, he did not rehabilitate Trotsky. Trotsky was still considered an outlier in the Communist Party, and he got very, very little respect. So this man gave everything up. He gave up his family, his kids, his wife. He gave up everything. He went into exile. He got tortured in exile. He was, and he was a nobody. And you know what, Mr. Davidovich Bronstein, Mr. Trotsky? Dude, you're still a nobody. You're still nothing. Communism is still rejected. It's a failed approach. It's a failed ideology. And please, somebody share this. Share this with Bernie. Share this with AOC and other communists out there. Doesn't work, and it's wrong. Not only for the Jews, it's wrong. If you enjoy this, please share it. If you take offense to this, please tell me how. Rabbi@thechaicenter.com. If you like this, please share it with others. If you'd like to help the Chai Center, because of the Chai Academy, so you can make a donation at thechaicenter.com/donate. If you like more of this, chaicenter.com/academy, youtube.com, put in the Chai Academy. You can also buy my book at thechaicenter.com/book. Don't make money in the book. It's just educational. God bless. Be well.